to invite Miquel de Paladella to the stage, the CEO of UpSocial. And let me already tell you that UpSocial is an organization specialized in implementing and scaling innovative solutions to critical social problems. And how they do that, that's what Miquel is going to tell us. Miquel, the floor is yours.
In 1995, I got my first job in Rome, in Italy, and working for the Society for International Development, I was sent all around the world to try and document how poor people escape poverty. And it was very exciting, a very exciting job. I went to Bangladesh to start documenting how microcredit was actually changing the life of so many women and families. Or I went to Mexico to work on alternative currencies, how currencies actually, some currencies that the poor, informal currencies that the poor had created, to try and see if they could actually exchange goods and services because they have the capacity, but they didn't have the means to exchange them. So they had these alternative currencies that actually expired if you don't exchange them, so you cannot accumulate them. It was an amazing pieces of work, and since then, and I'm talking about 30 years ago, what I have seen is that there were amazing promises made around social innovation. We were documenting these and sending them to the UN so that they would trickle down. So the promise is, and perhaps, or the first question that one would have is why? Why was there so much expectations on social innovation? And why is this focus on social innovations? And I think at that time, 30 years ago, we were already aware that many of the questions we were making to the social problems were really not the right questions. And we perceived these wicked problems of interconnected, deeply entrenched problems, which are still there today, but we were not really making the right questions so that we can see the problem from a vision of how do we actually solve them. Or we had also the problems of knowing that investing in prevention, particularly in social services, was good in the long term, but we were all focused on the emergency. We were all just looking at the fire and putting all the resources on the fires instead of saying, how do we prevent the fire? Which still happens today. Or we also perceive this difficulty, particularly when we had the document on how people escape poverty. We saw the light, and suddenly in the UN it was getting diluted. It was not trickling down. I think now at the European level we could perhaps see the same thing, that ideology somehow is on the way of experimentation. Experimentation understood in the sense of generating knowledge and evidence on what works and what doesn't. And also, and that's, I guess, also evident today, is that most of the problems were growing faster than the solutions we were delivering. So we didn't know how to scale up. We didn't know how to transfer innovation. So social innovation has, for at least the 30 years that I've been working on the field, remained sometimes amazing anecdotes that do not go beyond the borders of the original project. We don't know how to extract some of the lessons, or how to extract what we call active ingredients. What is the paracetamol of this medicine? You know, we have all the details, but we get lost on what is the only ingredient that actually makes your fever go down, right, on social innovation. And another one was this perception that we were treating life as if it was all compartmentalized. So we were all divided in these silos where everyone is expert on, friends and family, others on families, others on my professional life, others on some other things, and we don't talk to each other, we don't connect. So how can we actually face this entrenched reality, these wicked problems, if we all do it in our silos? And again, I am talking about 1995. And when I look at it, and I was preparing this chat, it was like, okay, so what has changed? And perhaps what has changed is that, yes, we've been just producing hot air very often. It's not really, we haven't really delivered on the promise of social innovation. And perhaps the perception is that we are all focused on making the wheel move of our trains. We are all on these trains, making the wheel move, perhaps even faster every day. We have more capacities than we had in 95 to move the wheel faster, move the train faster. But somehow the destiny is set. And we are looking just at the wheel and all, turning it around. So, and I think this image is extremely damaging to the kinds of work that we do in our institutions, in public, in private, in NGOs. It doesn't matter where. But this is the kind of wrong image that we somehow, I think, feel in many places. And I like this one much better. I live in Barcelona, it's my town, and those that know how to sail, we know that just a small turn at the beginning gets you to a completely different direction. So what do we need when we think of social innovation? What do we need? And I think the perception of ourselves as these small boats that are in real water, that we are in real conditions, that have the capacity of exploring new ways before moving the big boat. That is the kind of perception that I think is more useful, rather than the train and us moving the wheel. We need this capacity of moving around in real terms and start exploring possible alternative paths. But then these guys, they are useless unless they are connected to the guy that actually holds the wheel, or the people that actually hold the wheel. So sometimes the problem is that we don't have enough resources to start exploring different avenues. Sometimes there is a disconnect between the big boat and the small boats. So if there is a big question that we can make today, and I think it could be interesting to discuss this day that we have left, is actually how do we make the promise of social innovation, how do we make it real, right? And so in these 30 years, I just wanted to take some distance and say, okay, what are the 7 lessons that I have learned? And it is limited to my experience, so I apologize for this. I'm not an academic. I don't read all the reports that exist there. I read a lot, and I love reading about other people's experiences. But these are really my 7 messages that I would share with you and perhaps open up the discussions in the panel later on. So the first one is this idea that sometimes I have the impression that we go around social innovation with a supply approach. Supply approach is basically we go everywhere with a solution in search of a problem. And we have so many people with solutions in search of a problem. And the problem is that we don't have a demand for the solution. We have a need for innovation, and there is a clear, evident need for innovation, but it's not explicit. So in order to transfer innovation from one place to another, unless we do it from a demand side, unless we transform the need into a demand for an innovation, for a different approach that would be more effective, more efficient, a different sort of questions or frames to actually look at the problem, we are not really addressing the capacity of a system to solve one of the problems. The other one is the obsession around the problem, around the challenge. We are not that good sometimes in the field of social services and some of these social challenges that we have in understanding that data exists. There is plenty of data. There is no excuse not to get data. It's available, it's just not processed. It is hard to get, and it's hard to dig. Perhaps with artificial intelligence, there are new possibilities of starting to get data, and particularly to start getting data to talk to each other, to connect data from one to the other, to start looking at different frames, because there are different ways of looking at a problem, and we don't explore different ways of looking at it, or getting engaged beneficiaries. So we went to a problem, we were contracted to solve the problem of how do we help young girls in Kolda, in Senegal, finish secondary education. And we went there. We had, with our preconceived ideas about the role of parents, and particularly of mothers, around the expectations of girls with their education and so on. We went there, and we basically discovered that the problem has many faces, but perhaps the one that we underestimated the most is that secondary education was not relevant in their lives. It wasn't relevant. The French curriculum applied to Kolda, which is a rural area in the southern part of Senegal was not creating any decent new economic opportunity for the girls. So the girls were the first ones saying, this is not going to change my life, I'm not interested. And we found an amazing innovation in Paraguay called self-funded schools that actually have business models in the school and help boys and girls actually get a pay and get to school for free to try and produce things and learn as they produce, learn as they sell. That's the kind of model that we ended up exporting to Senegal. So having these different beneficiaries engaged in the process of defining the problem, understanding what are the real dimensions of the problem, I think is important. And the depth. So dig deep on the whys. When I see some documents that my clients present to us defining the problem, you see it so superficially, all the symptoms and never the causes. And I love to put myself in the shoes of my little daughter at the beginning when she was saying the whys, the 5 whys in a row. No? So why is this? Well, this is why. And then, so why again? And why again? And then you dig deeper. And you finally get to the solution. The deeper you dig, the easier, the more evident the solution becomes. Third, prevention. Now, everyone knows about prevention. But the key element for me is when we really work with all the clients and with beneficiaries to try and understand what is the key moment of intervention. When are we going to get the biggest result? So in preventing long-term unemployment, we discovered that it is the day they lose employment. Okay, look, we had this group of 45 years old people in the Basque Country saying, I've lost my job. I need, a couple of months to reset because this was a big throw. Mental health is bad, and so on. Look, mental health, fine. We are going to work on your mental health. Have this weekend. We start on Monday. Because there's no way we can waste a single day. And wasting a single day is good for your mental health. We're going to find ways of doing the whole picture of everything you need to do to confront this problem. But the right moment of intervention, the moment where it would have the biggest impact, is the key obsession that we need to have when facing one of these wicked problems we face. Number 4, we do a lot of experimentation today. I'm so happy that in these 30 years, what we see is a systematic approach to experimentation. We don't have pilots now, so many pilots. There are different ways of piloting, but they are experiments. We are testing without knowing exactly the result, and we are able to put hypotheses that we want to validate. So this is good. The problem is that the same problem when I worked at UNICEF so many years ago, also in New York. In UNICEF, we were very good at designing pilot projects that would end as pilot projects and die as pilot projects. We don't think of the legacy. And the legacy is the knowledge. Is what do we do with this knowledge? And suddenly, we had actually faked experiments that were not useful. They were not useful because the knowledge we were extracting from it was not scalable. We were playing with, let's make it successful, as big as possible, the biggest success possible. But we didn't plan that intervention was not scalable. So we were testing things that were useless. Right? So trying to think of what is the legacy you need. And again, the example of the Basque Country was, okay, we want to do this mentorship program because we have all the services, but they are not used. Okay, so let's have a mentor to support these guys that lose their job. And we have a ratio of 1 mentor for 15 people. And we asked, but is this sustainable? I mean, if you apply it to the whole Basque Country, is it going to work? Well, no, but how do we ensure result? Right? So that was the wrong question. The wrong question is, what is scalable? And we discovered that scalability was 1 to 40, which is much better than today, which is 1 to 1,000. 1 officer to 1,000 people, which is not a mentor, obviously. But 1 to 40, it is doable. So let's explore that, and not the 1 to 15 that we cannot afford. The systemic causes, that's a kind of approach that I told you about when we were exploring the reasons why, going in depth. And there was an image of an iceberg. And in an iceberg, we are very good at describing events. The problem of describing events is that we can only react to them. I'm going to put you an example also here. In terms of education, we were contracted to try and see if we could solve the problem of STEM vocations in Spain. STEM vocations are scientific vocations. And we saw that math was an extremely powerful tool for children to label themselves that I am not a math person, and my innate capacity makes me absolutely incapable of learning. So it's a DNA thing. There's a cable that was lost somewhere when we were given birth, right? So what is the event? The event is that at the end of the class, I have 4 children there that are totally disconnecting and vegetating in my math class for an hour every single day. So I have the vegetables there, right? The only thing I can do is get the vegetables at the end of the class and say, OK, let's catch up, right? But if we go the first level down and we start understanding the patterns is that every year I have between 3 and 7 children that are vegetating in my class. So that I can perhaps anticipate the problem and say, OK, I'm going to deliver 1 hour a week at the end of the school day to try and fix the problem. But behind the pattern, there are the underlying structures. So how do we teach teachers to teach math? That was a problem. Many teachers in primary education do not understand the math they are explaining. And they don't know how to do it in a way that you start with the concrete, because math is extremely concrete. It's so easy when you dig deep into it. It's so easy because it's logical. And you start manipulating. When you start manipulating, everything becomes evident. But the problem is when you move from the concrete to the abstract. These steps is where we miss most of the children. So if we know how to do the steps, if we give them the resources to build on how do you do one step after the other, that would actually work. So these are the underlying structures that actually generate the problem. So unless we are able to reform, redesign some of these resources, rethink on the way of we teach teachers, we're not going to solve the problem. And below this, we have the mental models. And these are perhaps the most significant factors in determining the final result. And we understood, because there is scientific evidence, that actually when we believe that it is normal to have 4 vegetables in my math class, that it is normal to have 4 children failing systematically, the children actually believes it. And when he believes it, he doesn't make any effort, because effort is irrelevant. So I fail. So I get demotivated. So I still reinforce this belief that I am not a math person, and so on and so forth. This is a vicious circle, right? So unless we break the vicious circle, we are not going to solve the problem. How many of the big social problems that we face are based on mental models that need to be addressed? So there's no need of even investing in prevention unless we look at these 2 other dimensions. One very difficult concept in the 21st century is slowness. The fact that many of our bosses do not, and clients in my case, do not understand that social change is slow food, is a slow change. It takes years. It takes years to measure what really matters. So we give ourselves horizons, temporal horizons, that are not realistic. They are not realistic. And the idea that we need to build ecosystems, the idea that we need to engage society to actually demand something that is latent there but is not explicit. And unless we make it explicit, there's no need for other things to happen. So we need to strategically face the way in which we actually change the system. No? And how do we get into university to change the way teachers teach? How do we make parents say, never tell to their children, I was not a math person. I mean, it is normal that we just forget the cable, right? So these kind of things are important. And just to finish, the scalability element. So when scalability is not designed in the experiment from the very start, it's never gonna scale. Now, there are perhaps 2 or 3 lessons that I want to share here. The first one is this determining the active ingredients that I mentioned to you before. Every single innovation has 1, 2, 3 active ingredients. Isolating them is very important, because these active ingredients are not adaptable to the context. So we all want to transfer our amazing innovations, or we want to all transfer an amazing innovations coming from another European city. This is very fine. But unless we understand what is adaptable and what is not, what is a non-negotiable particularly, and what is negotiable, what is adaptable, we're never going to do it. Second lesson is simplicity. So simplifying things is one of the major enablers of a scale. But there is a danger. And the danger is that we oversimplify. So we trespass the threshold of harm. We suddenly make it so simple that we have lost the active ingredient. So simplicity is hard. I'm not saying this is easy. This is very hard. And it's been 30 years. We've documented a bit how to document active ingredients, how to simplify so that it becomes very clear how to do it. And but we still don't have the silver bullet that will do it. And the final one is that demand for scalability is the major driving source. So don't go with your innovation, even if you have simplified, even if you have the active ingredients. Go around saying, what is it that you need? How do we solve this problem you need? What else do you need in your context? And put clear in front of the person, what is it that they need? And then find the solutions. Don't go with a solution anywhere in search of a problem. So transforming these latent needs into demand perhaps is the most important thing that we need to think about. So this is all I wanted to say. I hope it raises some questions or some ideas on how you can face some of the elements of the daily work that you have. I think it is an amazing moment to innovate. Compared to 1995, we were really 4 guys lost in the middle of nowhere in Rome, trying to document what social innovation was. Today, we have such an amazing promises around how do we motivate local communities to find solutions on their own. How do we catalyze some of them? How do we use artificial intelligence, particularly generative artificial intelligence, to understand this right moment of intervention, to predict some of the things that are going to happen, to understand the underlying structures and the mental models. So, thank you very much.